in international company, regional companies, so allow me to kind of floss and brag on my knowledge of different languages. Dahando,
Tananeng.
this is Dr. Marit Kitaw, Interim Director, African Minerals Development Center, based in Addis Ababa. Thank you for joining us for this joint podcast of the Social Newsroom and the Hali Hewa by the gracious Abigail. And based on what you stand for, first of all, put it into context where Africa stands in terms of minerals so that they can put some respect on it.
Thank you very much for having me. And very good Amharic, by the way. With regards to the minerals, historically, there's a paradox that Africa is endowed with mineral resources, but its people are in abject poverty. So some people call it resource curse, which I don't particularly like. It's just the paradox of plenty. It's because in itself, minerals are not a curse. It's how you exploit them, how you do them. So that's why in 2009, African heads of state and government approved and developed a vision. It's the Africa Mining Vision. Basically, is to look at minerals from the whole value chain, from of course the exploration, the exploitation, but how it reached to the people. Including through linkages, industrialization, having the right policies, having the right regulatory frameworks, mitigating environmental impact, also addressing the issue of artisanal small-scale mining, which is very prevalent in Africa. And at the end of the day, if you don't industrialize and value add through these minerals, then there's no transformation going on, because historically, raw is exported raw, and you don't get much, even if you get it through taxation and revenue. There's a lot of illicit financial flows, transfer, mispricing, even if it's licit. So we're not getting the best out of the minerals. That's why we set up exactly the blood diamonds. We're not getting the best out of you don't have the right markets. So we looked at it from the whole value chain perspective from the AMV. And our center, the Africa Minerals Development Center, is actually set up to implement the principles of the Africa Mining Vision.
You have spoken about energy transition, and of course, the world is looking at completely transitioning to clean energy. And of course, when we look at the transport, when we look at our phones, everything comes from Africa. So even as we're having the conversations on transition, how do we make sure we are not going back to the same colonial system that put us in this position? How do we make sure that if you're going to exploit the minerals that we need for transition, that African communities actually benefit from it? And how do we also make sure that it circulates within our continent?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you're addressing it. As you said, as we mentioned here, historically we have not benefited. So this global decarbonization agenda, this new energy transition, gives us a big opportunity. Why? Because the demand for critical or strategic green minerals that we call them, the demand for them is going to be 600 times more than today because of batteries for electric vehicles, solar panels, wind turbines. We all need minerals. People don't realize that all this decarbonization agenda requires a lot of minerals in them. So basically you have to go dirty to be clean. That's the kind of another paradox. But this time around, and you mentioned the people, 600 million people are out of electricity in Africa. And we're talking about transition. Transition to what? So for us, we see it's also an opportunity for electrification for Africa. Because when we do the strategy, and we are developing an African green mineral strategy, we see it from a perspective of our perspective. We have to impose that this time around, because it worked as an enclave. Before, it used to go from port from pit, wherever the minerals are, to port, and then really transport it to the west when they need it. No transformation done. And it comes back even more, we buy back 3 times, 4 times. I can even give you numbers, how much we pay for our own minerals being added value and coming back to us. So we're trying to be in that space now, in that space of value adding. And we did historically. If you look back before colonialism, before even slavery, we used to have add value to our minerals, the bronze and the metals. But the colonialism came, slavery came, and then finally it's the added value, the comparative advantage theory came, and then they became the one. So we're trying to get back. And we have some very good examples. So when we talk about critical strategic minerals, lithium, cobalt, manganese, nickel, graphite, we have them all on the continent. We have identified 13 critical minerals that are in Africa. For cobalt, 70% is in the DRC. For lithium, it's everywhere. And now we are discovering everywhere. Zimbabwe, yeah, but also Gabon, Ghana is discovering, Nigeria is discovering lithium, because before it was just, another. So we have all the minerals, but now we are seeing, I don't know if there's a memorandum of understanding between Zambia and the DRC to do precursor plants in DRC and Zambia to add value. So that's where you get the skills, you get the technology, you get the jobs, because if you just export through, you don't get the jobs, and that's transformational.
Yeah, and I love that we're taking back power, being that we have to be at the beginning of the conversation, otherwise we lose,
Exactly.
going back to the same system.
Part of that power is going to be spelt out in a declaration, and that's if we put the right terms and conditions for ourselves. This is a turning point, I see, and an opportunity for us to take back that power in terms of minerals. But you've spoken about the issue of curse of plenty. You've mentioned DRC. We all know historically it has had instability.
Yeah.
It's blessed with so much minerals and resource. We have had people here talk about Pan-African approach in the declaration together, not just country by country. So do you think it's possible, with the interests and the stakes at hand, to really read from the same page as a continent?
Yeah, that's a good and tough question and difficult one. But I have to say that's our aspiration. Of course, external forces are there. We cannot omit that. But since you talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo, we are very encouraged that now, because of a finding, a Bloomberg study that found, it was commissioned by African institutions, it found that there's cost and emissions advantage to having a precursor plant in the DRC. Not just emissions, because usually value addition is done, especially for these minerals, is done in China. So you can imagine the transport emissions. That was clear, but the cost is also because of locational advantage of cobalt, because of the wages of the workers. So there is cost advantage as well. So because of that, President Tshisekedi, we are having a special economic zone that is being set up in Lumumbashi. That would do, actually, this is practical, that would do. So we are looking for technology owners, because that's why we need, and the skills. And there's a Lubumbashi Advanced Technology Center of Excellence that is being set up as well, because we need the skills as well, because we're not talking in the vacuum. But when you talk about one voice, and that's where I'm coming to, there is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, right? So if you use it conveniently, sometimes manganese, for instance, you find it in South Africa, not in DRC. You find lithium in Zimbabwe. You find nickel in Mozambique, and graphite in Mozambique as well. So if you do the agreements and then you can get it at preferential price, then that gives you, first you start with the SADC, the Southern African Development Community, and then it becomes Africa Voice. And really, and since you talk about the declaration, that's what we really need. We need a bold statements, bold and unified Africa Voice. It's not easy. We are 55 countries. We have different, but still, I think it can be done, especially on this climate change. And we are doing this Africa. That's why we are here. Actually, we are launching the African Green Mineral Strategy. We want it to be endorsed. It's about the same things that we talked about: the value addition, making sure that it transforms on the continent. We get the most out of it: jobs, technology transfer, skills transfer, and then transformational to the people, but also addressing environmental and social impacts, and looking at it from a holistic view. So that's what the gist of the strategy is. And once it's endorsed by African countries, then we can talk about. There's no mandatory, as you know.
Yes.
It's not mandatory, but at least it's a guide, it's a direction, and it's a one voice.
It's an aspiration.
And that's an aspiration, and we have to be bold, like really. bold about it.
Amazing. I don't think I have any more questions.
We've mined all we can.
Very encouraged that the youth, we are encouraged by the youth presence, and we want you to be the voice of this as well. And I'm very encouraged to see all the youth here at this, and we really count on you in the future.
Absolutely. And I think we're really trying our best to make sure our engagement in these particular processes are not cosmetic or symbolic. We actually want to be meaningfully engaged and to be systemically embedded in processes that matter. So thank you so much for having this conversation.
You've mentioned the youth. Sorry about that. You've mentioned the youth, and I think I want to hang on to that point and ask, from your perspective of the minerals that we have as a continent, is there interest in the youth getting into that sector, or is it dominated by the elders? Because I feel there's an element of them wanting to hoard and not letting anyone else come in.
Yes, that's a very good question. The problem is it's very capital intensive. Exploration takes time. And actually, I'm glad you asked. We're trying to encourage African investors to invest, because that's where if we don't depend on the mining companies coming from outside to explore, to exploit, then with the money and everything will be staying in the continent. So it's very capital intensive. That's why we need some kind of a way of financing. The West, they have their stock market, so we're trying to make the link with the stock markets in Africa. We're trying to get that link, and so that they can leverage the stock market to finance some of the projects. We talk about a lot of money, let's say. So that's why maybe it's not attractive to the youth, but if they are empowered, I even mean like not just empowered with the education, but also with capital, then they could be. The junior companies that come from outside are actually young people from outside, because they are cautioned by their own governments, stock exchange, or they give them the requisite capital. At least they borrow at a very differential rate or preferential rate. So we need to empower the youth in that way as well, in making sure that they have access to capital.
You better take advantage of it, not just splash it or splurge. Dr. Marit Kitaw, the Interim Director of the African Minerals Development Center, we say thank you for your time, and more sessions going forward?
Yes, tomorrow actually we are launching from 11 to 12 at Aberdare. We're launching the African Minerals